Hi, and welcome to Win-Win Women and to the show Your Inside Power, where we are striving to get you to use the intellectual faculties that you have inside your mind and to get you to utilize those powers that will help you achieve what you want. Well, today's episode is called, Are You Connected with Source Energy? And this is a super important topic because if we're not connected with source, then we tend to allow ourselves to be a victim. So before we get into all this, let me read you this quote. You know, one of the things I love about what I do is I want you to be able to start thinking and deep surface, not the surface thoughts, but the deep thoughts that make you question some of the embedded habitual thought patterns that you have. So I want to read this quote by Earl Nightingale, where he says, "Strange and marvelous things will happen with constant regularity as you alter your life and begin living in harmony with the laws of the universe." So the laws of the universe are one way to talk about source energy. You know, when you're working with the laws, you see, there are laws in this universe, just like gravity. So if you jump off a 12-story building, you are not going up. You are going to go down because of the laws of gravity. Well, we have these laws that work with scientific things, but we also have laws that work within our minds to help us create or to destroy something happening in our lives. And the more we can connect with source energy, the better. So that's what he's talking about here. You know, when you start to live in harmony with the laws of the universe, you see, you can drastically change your life when you connect with that source energy. You know, companies spend millions of dollars every year training people, and yet people's results don't change. Well, why is that? Why don't people's results change? Well, they estimate 95 and maybe even up to 97% of a person's day is habitual thought process and habitual things that we do. Well, how are results going to change with just a little bit? You know, if we're pretty much in like a robot control, how are we going to change things? And then lots of times, if we're not doing that, we're out here chasing some shiny object. And so the part of our brain that would connect with source energy is the very part of our brain that gets underutilized. So when we have goals, which we'll talk about another time, but when we have goals, we have to have something that's going to inspire us to do something more with our lives than what we're currently doing. So let's look a little bit deeper at this source energy. So when you're working with the law, you're interpreting, and it should bring clear thought process to us. So we have to start going deep inside. You see, if all we're thinking surface thoughts, it's never going to happen. But as you start to grow in awareness, and that's what we have to start to do, we have to become more aware. You know, a lot of times we're aware of the surroundings because we interact with the world through our five senses. So we're aware of what's going on around us. And how are we interpreting that? Are we using our intellectual faculties of our imagination, of our perception? Are we using our will, our memory? What are we using? Reasoning? How are we interpreting our intuition? And so we have to start looking at how we're dealing with the world. It says here, there must be a constant stream of new thought, better thought, and inner thought to ensure progression in life. Well, how many of us do that? Most people get so caught up in the day-to-day living that they forget to think of new thoughts, of a better thought, and of, truer thoughts in a progression. I live in a wonderful, wonderful community. But not only in my community, but communities surrounding us, they tend to do things the same way year after year after year after year. And I remember one instance when I questioned, because I'm really considered an outsider in my community, even though I've lived here for almost 40 years. I questioned the way something was being done in a community or, organization. And I was pretty much told, well, that's the way we've always done it. Well, that doesn't mean that because that's the way it's always been done, that that's the best way. We have to have new thoughts. We have to have progressive thoughts. We have to continually evolve in our thinking, and we have to think deep thoughts. So there must be a constant stream of new thought. Now, think about yourself. You say, is your thinking serving you? Is it serving you well? Or is it not serving you well? Are you able to do the things that you'd love to do? Or is your thought process not serving you well? How are you spending your day? These are questions to ask. Am I spending my day, the way I want to spend it? Or am I spending my day the way it's being dictated to me? It's a good question, isn't it? You see, once you master your mind and when you start mastering your higher faculties that you have, those ones I mentioned, the intellectual faculties of imagination, intuition, memory, perception, reason, and will, when you start utilizing those intellectual faculties, you are starting to live from the inside out instead of allowing the outside world to dictate you. And that's what your inner power is all about. So everybody knows how to do better than they ever thought they could. It doesn't mean we're doing it. So we have to really start looking deep inside. We limit our thought process and we limit what we think we can do because that's where our thought patterns have been developed. You see, we have generational thought patterns that have been passed down to us from sometimes centuries ago. I was just talking to somebody earlier today about money thought processes. And, a lot of times people want to earn more money. That's natural to have a more abundant life. And you see something you'd like to have and you think, I wish I could afford that, but I can't. And that's your thought process. Why can't you afford it? You see, we are here for abundance. Look around you. Look around nature. Nature is completely abundant. When you have an apple, there's seeds inside that apple. Each one of those can grow another apple tree. And then how many apples can you have because of that one seed? You grow an apple tree, you have bushels of apples from one seed. That's abundance. Well, if there's abundance in nature, why do you think source energy, God, infinite intelligence, whatever you want to call it, would not want his highest creatures to be abundant? See, when you explain it that way, it makes more sense. But I'll never forget my very first coaching client I had read the first paragraph in the book, The Science of Getting Rich, and was so turned off about it because they thought that I was going to always talk about, being rich, 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 rich. And they had a problem with it because of their habitual thought process. And yet they went from 150,000 to over 7 million in 6 years in their company. You see, they had to overcome that abundance idea and the idea that was okay. They had to overcome their thought process that had been embedded in their minds for years, because only when they became more abundant would they be able to share that abundance with people to work with them? And they kept hiring people, and they kept giving bonuses to those people, and they kept expanding and expanding their business, because the more they could expand, the more people they could help. If we look at lack and limitation, then we limit our ability to help others. So that's what we're here for abundance. So what you want to do is become a success-minded person instead of a failure-minded person. And man's problems are always mental in nature. See, they always start in our mind. Whatever problems we decide to create, we've created them in our minds. You know, we do that to ourselves. So if we do that to ourselves, if we create our problems, then we can also create our solutions by having a deeper thought process. So one of the things I want you to do is to practice cleaning out those thought processes. Well, how do we do that? Well, start to question why you do some of the things you do. What causes it? You know, there's a story, you may have heard this. A little girl came to her mom, and she said her mom was cutting off the ends of the ham before she put them in the pan to bake the ham. And she said to her mom, "Why do you do that?" And she goes, "Well, because my mom did that." So she went to her grandmother and said, "Grandma, why do you cut off the ends of the ham before you put it in your roasting pan?" And she said, "Well, it was because that's the way my mom did it." So they went to great grandma and asked her, "Why do you cut off the ends of the ham before you put it in the pan to bake it?" And she said, "Because my pan was only so big, so I had to cut off the ends in order to have it fit in a pan." Well, see, nobody questioned that until that little girl questioned it. What was the reasoning? And here we had, you know, generations of people doing the same thing and never thought about why, and never questioned it until this little girl questioned it. That had nothing to do with cutting off the ham. Had the question, the problem was the pan wasn't big enough. So you see, that's more a shallow thought. We just do it. We just do things. But when we start to question them, that's when we start to really be able to think deeper about ourselves. So what are those deep thoughts that we have? And then what I want you to start to think about is, you know, when you start to question what's happening, you are no longer the victim. You see, when you get to source energy, now you can start to look at what the possibilities are there for you to do, instead of just looking at what might be available to you. So go to the source and find what it is. And I just want to read this one thing. You know, if we believe that we are victims of circumstances, then we are living from the outside world in, instead of becoming the person that we want to be and live from the inside out. And that's when you have to use your 6 intellectual faculties. And that's really what we do here at Your Inner Power, is that we're looking for the source energy that you can use to become more than what you want. And then once you've connected with source, you're going to become a more aware person. So then when you're setting your goals of what it is that you want to do, what you want to be, what you want to have, now you are connected with more awareness and with more energy. So when you set those goals, what you're going to do is you're going to start shifting your habitual thought processes. So to shift that habitual thought process, you have to build what we call a new paradigm. So our paradigms are set in our mind, and they can be there generational, or they could have been set by you. But a lot of times those paradigms are pretty much set by the time we're 7 or 8 years old. Think back to, let's just look at money. You know, did you ever have somebody say in your life, "We can't afford that," or "Money doesn't grow on trees"? That's a very common thing that parents will say to children, and you might have said that to your own children. And so what we have to look at is, where did that come from? I had this story, this one lady I was talking to, she had been born and raised in an Eastern European country. She didn't share with me which one it was, and it really doesn't matter for this story. But in her country, she had been told from the time she was a very small child that if you made too much money, like over $50,000, that you were not a good person. So she grew up believing that. So now she's here in the United States and she goes into a real estate career. And as she's selling real estate, every time she got close to that 50,000 mark, she would tank her business. Now, it was an unconsciously tanking. She knew it didn't make any sense. She knew that it was a paradigm inside her mind, but yet she could not build that new paradigm that would allow her to go ahead and have the business that she wanted and allow her to earn more than $50,000. You see, those paradigms inside our mind are so strong and they control everything about us. Why do they control everything about us? Because that's our comfort zone, which that's what's controlling it. You see, our conscious mind does not create our action. It's our subconscious mind that turns us into action. So we have to realize that the subconscious mind's controlling everything that we do. And so in order to change that, we have to change the subconscious mind. Well, to do that, we have to build a new paradigm. So how do we do that? Well, there's two ways that we know that you can build a new paradigm. One is through something immediate, something drastic that happens. And generally, it's negative. So if you think of 9/11, that was something that was drastic. It changed a lot of people's paradigm very quickly, but it was a negative thing that happened. I had a friend, well, wasn't really a friend. He was a teacher of my kids. And he was on vacation one summer and a drunk driver hit their van, killing their 3-year-old child. Now, that was something very drastic, but out of it, it shifted his paradigm, shifted his thinking. He stopped teaching school. He set up a group for people, for parents who were grieving over children, and set up a whole foundation in honor of his son. And see, that was something very drastic. But a lot of times when something happens drastic, it's generally negative. So the only other way to change a paradigm is through constant repetition, constant spaced repetition. And so we do that by creating new thought patterns. So we get a thought, we decide to embed that thought into our subconscious mind. To embed it into our subconscious mind, we have to just repeat it over and over, and not just the words, but the pictures. So one of the best things I like to do to start to change your habitual thought process is to just meditate. So if you sit, very quietly, maybe have some nice music playing in the background, then you can start to think about what it is that you want. And as you think about what you want, start utilizing all the different senses that could be happening. So maybe you want a new job. And so you've gotten that new job and you hear people congratulating you on your promotion. And you hear your family being so proud of you, and you see the excitement. Maybe they have a big celebration for you. Maybe they brought in a cake, and you just hear and you smell and you see what's going on around you. And you just keep thinking of what it is, what that goal is. And you start to embed that in your mind, and you start to believe it's going to happen. And every time you're in that room, you see yourself in that position of the job that you want. And the way the laws of the universe work, the way you connect with source energy, once you have gotten to the point where you have become the person you need to be in order to accomplish that goal has to happen. Now, what happens is we often don't believe that. And so instead of constantly thinking of that goal over and over again, we think of it once or twice and think it's a nice idea. And as long as it's just in a conscious mind, nothing's going to happen because your conscious mind does not control your actions. But once you've embedded that goal so much in your subconscious mind, then you'll move into action. So let me give you an example of that. I was teaching school and I decided I wanted a new career, and a career that I had been looking at for probably 15 years prior to that was to be a corporate trainer. And I started to go to work every day where I was teaching children. But in my mind, I was going to that corporate training job. I'd look at the children in my room, but I was in my mind, I was looking at adults. Now I did this for a couple months, and finally I got the courage to do a training video. So I videotaped myself training, like I was pretending I was training a corporate group, and then I sent that to 3 companies. Now here's the funny thing. I had in mind which company I wanted to work with. And so the first company that was not that choice one, we'll say A, B, and C. So company A immediately sent me a rejection notice saying, we're sorry, we're not really looking to hire right now. And, pretty much don't apply again. Company B took them a couple months and they sent a message back saying, what, we don't have any openings right now, but please reapply in 6 months. So very discouraging. Company C, the one that I really wanted to work with, I didn't hear from until probably 6-7 months went by. And all of a sudden one day I get this phone call from the hiring agent for that company. And she was telling me that she watched my video and she was very impressed with it and wanted me to come and to get the training and to hire me to work for their company. Now that's the company I wanted to. And you see, all that time, all those months from the time I made that video until that phone call, I kept going in, pretending in my mind that I was doing training. So it had to happen. And that's the way when we connect with source energy, and that's the way it works. When you have that goal and you've gotten it into your subconscious mind and you're acting it out, then things just have to happen. So that's one of the things that we need to start working on when we're thinking of using our inside powers. So we have to start thinking, and then we have to start taking action. You see, if I'd have never made the videotape, I wouldn't have been hired. So we have to take action. We have to do something. And there's another way that people run into problems. I was talking to a lady the other day, and she really wants to get her own business started, so she says. And every time I would give her an idea, well, why don't you do this? Well, but I have to do this first. And she kept putting up one roadblock after another roadblock as to why she couldn't just move ahead. Well, all she's doing in that case is stopping herself from moving forward. And she was choosing to limit herself. Well, if you're doing that, you're not taking action. So I challenged her. I said, I'm going to text you in a week, and I want to see what action. I want you to do one action that's moving you closer to the goal that you have in mind. And see, that action has to come from the subconscious. So as long as an idea is just in your conscious mind, you don't get worried about it. It's when it gets into your subconscious that we start to really get emotionally involved. And sometimes then it can cause that fear and apprehension to come into our lives. So what we have to do is to learn to live in harmony with the good that we desire and to get on the same frequency as that goal that we want. So keep in mind, your mind is programmed, and you have programmed it as well as generations before you. And keep in mind the quote I started with, which was, strange and marvelous things will happen with constant regularity as you alter your life and begin living in harmony with the laws of the universe. So if you look in the chat, I just want to share with you some resources that will help to shift the paradigms. So I see a little mistake there, but I want you to grab this free gift that I have. And in this free gift, I'm going to have to get the link because it didn't come out right. But with the free gift, you are going to get a ticket to my event that is occurring in March. And also with this, just grab this one real quick. Also with this, you're going to get some videos. And the videos are about overcoming fear and procrastination, because that is something that consumes a lot of us. We're afraid of things that are going to happen. We're afraid of stepping out there and doing something. And that is completely a real feeling. Sometimes people say, oh, just don't worry about it. It's not, don't be afraid of things. Fear is a real physical feeling. And so we have to acknowledge that and understand what's happening in our mind, because as long as we have an idea and we don't decide to move towards it, there is no fear. But as soon as we decide that we want to do something and we want to go and take that first step, that's when we start to have a lot of fear in our mind. So this video will explain to you about what fear is and how to utilize that fear and just keep moving through something so you get to freedom. Because as long as you're afraid of something, you stay in bondage and you stay stuck. And that's where a lot of clients that I work with tend to be stuck because they're afraid to take that next step. And that next step could be the freedom that they really want. So that's in that package. You're also going to get a package on, or a video, short video on your self-image, because until you step out, until you get onto the same frequency as the goal that you desire, then you can't get or achieve that that goal. Because you see, your self-image is such an important paradigm, and you can never outperform the image you hold of yourself. So you need to make sure that you have created the new image, created that new paradigm, that new desire of what you want, and moved on to that. And when you do, then you're up here with on the frequency of what you want. And once you get on that frequency and you can stay on that frequency of your goal, then you will connect and you will be able to accomplish that goal. So that's an app package. The other thing you're going to see in an app package is a PDF with a few short videos on 3 tips to success, how to be very successful in your life. And then, as I said, included in that is a ticket to my March event called Live Bigger. And in that Live Bigger event, we're going to talk about the 3 things that you need to have simultaneously happening in your life to get that quantum leap. And we're also going to be talking about how to get, most of the clients I work with double or triple their income in a year. And how can you get to that point where you're doubling and tripling and being more productive and more effective? So that's all going to be part of the Live Bigger event. And there's also a link in there to book a call with me. And then we can chat about your goal and how we might be able to work together, or how I can assist you in any way and serve you to make sure that you become the magic in your dreams and become the person that you truly desire. So it's been wonderful having you here. This is Patricia Stepler with Your Inside Power.